hela or hello in Yiddish. So, good morning or good day to each and every one of you. So, I am Jennifer V. Lugares and I was tasked by my professor to report a language which is what I've said earlier is the Yiddish language. So, before we move on to the first topic of this language, I will first share to you some facts that you might not know about this language and might help you in the future. Okay, so let's begin.
The contents of my video presentation for the Yiddish language. The consonants and vowels of this language, the sound patterns, lexical categories, and last but not the least, the phrase categories of this language. And as you can see in the picture, these are the Yiddish people or the Yiddish natives.
So, before we move on to the first topic of this language, I will first share to you some facts that you might not know about this language and might help you in the future. Okay, so let's begin.
Yiddish is a dialect of German. It is a West Germanic language spoken by the Ashkenazi Jews. The term Yiddish is derived from the word Jewish and also a spoken language of Jewish people. Originated during the 9th century, the year 1000 CE. Yiwu serves as the world headquarters of Yiddish language and pioneered important linguist research on Yiddish. And last but not the least, dialect which integrates many languages including German, Hebrew, Aramaic, and various Slavic and Romance languages. So, the Yiddish alphabet is consists of 22 consonants and 5 vowels. And Yiddish language uses the same alphabet as Hebrew.
Now we're done with the facts. So now let's move on to the alphabet of the Yiddish or Hebrew language. And for you guys to efficiently learn, I will show you the picture of the alphabet of this language. And in order for you to learn on how to pronounce those letters correctly, I will let you watch a video in it. So here's the picture.
So you guys take a look at this picture because as what I've said, this will be effectively help you to learn more about Yiddish.
Org. Today we're going to do a quick overview of the Hebrew alphabet, just the names of each letter and how the letter is pronounced. If you'd like to try to read Hebrew, remember that Hebrew is written from right to left, not left to right as English is. Let's get started. Aleph, which is silent, or some would say makes the sound before the A in apple. Aleph. Bet, which is pronounced B as in boy, or V as in victory. Native speakers know which way to pronounce it, just as we know how to pronounce the C's in circus. But in texts written for non-natives, like Hebrew English prayer books or Bibles, you'll find a dot inside the bet when it's pronounced B, and no dot when it's pronounced V. This dot is not found in texts that are written for people fluent in Hebrew. Bet. Gimel is pronounced G as in good, never like in general, always like in good. Like most letters, it's pronounced the same whether there's a dot inside or not. Gimel. Dalet is pronounced like the D in door. Dalet. Hey is pronounced like the H in hello. Like H in English, it's silent at the end of words. Hey. Vav can be pronounced like the V in victory, the O in home, or the U in moon, which is usually transliterated as U. If there are no dots, it's pronounced V as in victory. If it has a dot on top, it's usually pronounced O as in home, but if the letter before it has a vowel of its own, then it does double duty, both V and O, pronounced vo. If it has a dot in the middle, it's usually pronounced U as in moon, but if the letter before it has a vowel of its own, then it's pronounced V, as in victory. Remember, those dots are only found in texts for non-natives. Vav. Zion is pronounced Z as in zebra. Zion. Chet is pronounced ch, a throat-clearing noise that doesn't occur in English. It's like in ach in German, or loch in Scottish. Chet. Tet is pronounced T as in tango. Tet. Yud is pronounced Y as in yellow. Sometimes yud is part of the preceding vowel and is not pronounced at all. You can tell because it doesn't have a vowel of its own. But vowels, like dots, are not found in texts written for native speakers of Hebrew. Yud. Kaf sounds like the K in kangaroo, or the ch sound that chet makes. If there's a dot, it makes the K sound. If there's no dot, it's the ch sound. Kaf is written differently when it appears at the end of a word. There are 5 letters in Hebrew that have a special form for the end of a word. Final kaf almost never has a dot in it, so it's almost always pronounced ch, kaf, and final kaf. Lamed is pronounced L as in lucky. Lamed. Mem is pronounced M as in Mary. Mem is another letter that has a special final form. This is the final form of mem. Mem and final mem. Nun is pronounced N as in November. Nun is another letter that has a special final form. This is final nun. Nun and final nun. Samech makes an S sound as in Sahara. Samech. Ayin is silent like the letter Aleph. Ayin. Pe makes the sound of P as in pear, or F as in fox. If Pe has a dot inside, it makes the P sound. If there's no dot, it makes the F sound. Pe also has a special final form. Final Pe almost never has a dot inside, so it's almost always pronounced with the F sound. Pe and final Pe. Tzadi makes a TS sound like at the end of the word pants or nuts. Tzadi has a special final form, tzadi, and final tzadi. Kuf makes a sound like the K in kangaroo. It's sometimes transliterated as a Q to distinguish it from kaf, which also makes a K sound, and also because it comes from the same source as the letter Q in English. Kuf. Resh makes an R sound. Now most Americans pronounce it like the R in road, but Israelis pronounce it as more of a guttural sound. Resh. Shin makes an SH sound, as in show, or an S sound, as in so. When the dot is over the right branch, it makes the SH sound. When it's over the left branch, it makes the S sound. Shin. The last letter of the Hebrew alphabet is Tav, which makes a T sound, as in tango. Now some older Jews and Orthodox Jews will pronounce this letter as an S sound if it doesn't have a dot inside, but most people pronounce it as T, with or without the dot. Tav. Now I know I said that Tav was the last letter, but actually there's one more thing we need to talk about, and that's vowels. Like the dots we've seen before, you won't find vowels in texts in Israel. They're only found in texts written for non-natives. Let's start with patach, which looks like a dash under the letter. It's shown here with the letter aleph, which is silent. Patach makes the ah sound in father. You pronounce the patach after the consonant it goes with. So for example, you would pronounce this, ba. Next is shava, which looks like a colon under the letter. Shava is either silent, or it makes a generic unstressed sound, like the E in begin. If it's the first vowel in a word, it makes the schwa sound. Otherwise, well, sorry, I don't know a good way to tell which way it goes. Sometimes you'll see what looks like a patach side by side with a shava under the letter. That's actually a separate vowel called chataf patach, or half patach. It makes the same ah sound as patach, but it's unstressed, never gets the emphasis. Next is kametz, which looks like the letter T. Kametz also makes the ah sound in father, at least for most people. Some older Jews and Orthodox Jews will pronounce this like the ah in saw. Nothing wrong with that pronunciation, but most people today pronounce it as ah. Now just to make things as difficult as possible, kametz is sometimes pronounced differently, more of an O sound. Some texts write kametz differently when it's pronounced this way, and some make it larger or make the shaft longer, but most texts just write it the same way. If it's not written differently, I don't know a good way to tell which way it's pronounced, but you can pretty much assume that it's going to be an ah sound. The most common word that uses this unusual pronunciation is kol, which means all. Just like patach, kametz sometimes appears with a shava, making a new vowel called chataf kametz, half kametz. Still sounds like the ah in father, but it never gets the emphasis. Okay, let's try something easier. This is segol, which is a triangle of dots. Segol makes the eh sound in bed. Segol can also appear with a shava, making chataf segol, an unstressed eh sound. And that's the last of the chataf vowels. This is cholam, a dot above and to the left of the consonant. It's the only vowel point that's not written below the letter. Cholam makes the O sound in home. If this sounds familiar, that's because you've seen it before on top of the vav. This is kibbutz, which is 3 diagonal dots. It makes the short U sound in put. Next is tsere, 2 dots side by side. It's pronounced like the A in neighbor or they. Sometimes it's followed by a yud that doesn't have a vowel of its own. When you see that, the yud is part of the tsere vowel and isn't pronounced separately. And that's the way I learned it, and that's the way I hear it in America, but I gather that in Israel, it's pronounced A when it has a yud and eh when it doesn't have a yud. You can take that as you will. The last vowel is chirek, which is a single dot under the letter. Chirek makes an E sound, like the I in machine. Like tsere, it's sometimes followed by a yud that becomes part of the vowel. Also like tsere, some people say it's pronounced differently when it has a yud than when it doesn't. Some say it's pronounced as a short I in sit when it doesn't have a yud, and as the I in machine when it does have a yud. But I don't always hear it that way. Now I said earlier that the vowels are normally pronounced after they are consonants. So for example, you would pronounce this, ba, but there's one exception to that. If the last letter in the word is chet, and the vowel under it is patach, the patach is pronounced before the chet instead of after it as usual. The best known example of this is the word ruach, which means spirit, resh, which makes an R sound, shurek, which makes the U sound, chet, which makes the throat clearing sound, and patach, which makes the ah sound. So you'd think this was pronounced rucha, but when the last letter is chet and it's followed by patach, the patach is pronounced first, ruach. I've seen some texts that write the patach a little to the right when this happens, to make it more clear, but that's not common. So that's the entire Hebrew alphabet in just under 10 minutes. If you'd like to go a little deeper, I also have a series of videos that helps you tell the letters apart, and introduces some useful Hebrew vocabulary by showing the letters within words.
So now we will proceed to the next topic of this video presentation, which is the sound patterns. So Yiddish produces a CVCC or CVVC. CVCC means consonant vowel consonant consonant, and CVVC means consonant vowel vowel consonant. So here's an example of the CVCC pattern. Lachen, which means laugh. As we can see, the L is consonant, the A is vowel, the K and H is consonant. And as for the CVVC or consonant vowel vowel consonant pattern, we have the Shane, which means beautiful. As we can see, the first letter is consonant, the second and the third is vowel, and the last letter is also a consonant. So, the lexical categories present in the Yiddish language are first the noun, then articles, and then the adjectives, to be followed by the pronouns, and last but not the least is the verb. So we will first discuss the noun. It has 3 categories, which are the gender, case, and plural. The first category for the noun is the genders, which has 3 types. The first is the masculine, then to be followed by feminine, and last but not the least, the neuter. So the first one here is the masculine, which tells that loanwords are generally assigned with masculine gender. Then masculine gender are the ones denoting specifically male humans and animals. For the first example in the loanwords, the cafe, which means coffee. And then the second one is John, which denotes a male human's name. And other male human's name and animals are all masculine. Feminine are the nouns that denotes or depicts female humans and animals. For example, hon, which means hen, and hen lays eggs, so a hen is considered as a female animal. Another example is the name Angela and Carla. So we all know that Angela and Carla is always a girl's name. Another example tells us that nouns ending in unstressed schwa are feminine nouns. Abstract noun suffixes are feminine. For example, ung and height. Those suffixes are all feminine. And the last one is the neuter nouns. It says that diminutive nouns with suffix l are all neuter. We are done with the gender nouns, so now we will move on to the grammatical case. It has also three categories: the nominative, which is used for the subject, the accusative, which is for the direct subject, and last but not the least, the dative, which is for indirect object or object as preposition. And as for the last category for the nouns, which is the plural, and it has two forms, the irregular and the regular forms. So we will first discuss the regular forms.
For the first idea, nouns ending in a consonant vowel is plurally formed by the letter N, with the letter N. For example, the plural of tish, or translated into English, which is table, is tish with an N. As we can observe, the N is added to the word tish in order for it to attain its plural form, from the word tish to the word tish with an N. The second form is the irregular forms, es. These are usually nouns of Slavic origin, and er with umlaut. As you can see in the example, you can observe that er or is added, or the umlaut alone. Just look at the example and observe. And some words do not change in the plural. For example, the fish remains fish. Nouns built on the diminutive suffixes l and l form the plural in ek. So now let's move on to the articles. Articles are a subcategory that falls under determiners, but note that not all determiners are articles, but all articles are determiners. So now I will show you a chart for you to understand the articles more. Adjectives are words that generally modifies a noun or noun phrase or describe its referent. There are two types of adjectives. The first one is attributive. which directly modify a noun and are inflected to agree with the gender, number, and the case of the noun they modify. And as for the predicate, is not undergoing changes to express grammatical functions or attributes. So now let's move on to pronouns. And I will show you a chart that will help you understand what pronouns are present in the Yiddish language. Yiddish verbs are conjugated for person and number in the present tense. In the imperative, they conjugate only for number. Non-finite verb forms are the infinitive and the past participle. The infinitive of a verb is formed with the suffix n, which takes the form n in certain phonological contexts. The imperative uses the base form of the verb with no affixes in the singular and takes the suffix t in the plural. Here is the Yiddish present tense chart. So-called weak verbs form the past participle by adding the prefix ge and the suffix t to the stem. For example, the word bought. However, the strong verbs form the past participle
So
with
here
ge
is the
and
chart
n,
of the
usually
Yiddish past
accompanied by
tense
a vowel
participle.
change. For example, the word help from the stem help or health. The vowel change is unpredictable and there is no way to tell from the infinitive whether a verb is weak or strong. So here are the examples of the Yiddish past tense participle in the form of chart. Separable verbs. Yiddish has a family of separable verbs. These are verb stems co-occurring with the particle that sometimes occurs as a prefix attached to the verb stem and sometimes as a separate word. The particle the particle appears separate from the verb in the present tense but is attached as a prefix in the infinitive and participle. Yiddish does not have the inflected past tense, instead the auxiliary verbs. To have or to be are used with the past participle of the verb to construct the past tense. So here is a chart for the verb inflection. So for the last part, let us talk about the syntax. Syntax is the arrangement of words and phrases to create a well-formed sentences in a specific language. So Yiddish exhibits subject, verb, object, and subject, object, verb. So here's an example of SVO pattern. The Yiddish sentence means whether the boy will on the way see a cat. The subject here is the boy. The verb here is the see and the object here is the cat. And here is an example of object subject verb pattern. So the Yiddish sentence means the book sent I away. So the object here is the book. The verb here is to send and the subject here is I.